You're live. Hey, welcome everybody. We're here with another panel for the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition. And today we're going to be talking about inclusivity in esports. I'm super excited to get into this one, especially because I have two super impressive guests with me here tonight, this afternoon. So I'm Ray. I'm going to be your host. I'll be leading the panel today. And I am joined by Melissa Burns and Melanie Capone. So if you ladies want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, Melissa, you can go first.
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Melissa Burns. I am the founder and CEO of Esports Canada, which is, in a nutshell, Hockey Canada of esports, is how I describe it. When people think about esports, they often think of its Canadian equivalent, NHL. And this is looking at the development side of things up to our national teams performing or competing in nation-based competition. And so that's the world that I bring.
All right, Mel.
I'm Mel. I've competed in Valorant for around 6 years professionally, and I've played well occasionally. I'm on a break right now, but that's pretty much all there is to know. Melissa, do you prefer Melissa or Mel? You want to both be called Mel? You can have it. You can have it.
You know what? I go by whatever people call me. I respond to "Hey you."
Yeah. Hey you. Okay, got it.
You've got the corner on Mel. I'll go by Melissa because you've got the corner on Mel.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll take this while I visualize. Oh, she's back. I was visualizing Melissa in my brain. Yeah, the first game I ever played, it's a funny story, was actually Resident Evil when I was around 4 or 5 years old. Definitely shocking whenever I tell people this, but the reason why was my dad, obviously huge gamer. He put me onto gaming, and at the time I was having a lot of nightmares, a lot of night terrors as a child, and he was playing Resident Evil at the time. And his logic was, well, maybe she could play a video game that shows her how to defeat the monsters, and maybe that could translate in her dream. And it honestly kind of a crazy gamble, not gonna lie to you, but ended up working out. So that's got me into video games. I got into Oblivion, pretty much any game my dad was playing, I was playing. That went to CS, and yeah, it's history from there.
I love that. Yeah, I definitely did play a lot of games with my dad growing up as well. It's really nice to have that something to bond over. Melissa, welcome back.
Did you hear the question?
No, not at all.
No, okay, no worries. So just as like a little bit of an icebreaker question here, just wondering like what was kind of like the first game that you played when you were younger, or maybe just like one of the games that like you really loved as you were a child?
Well, okay, so elder millennial in the room. I grew up with like the old school stuff. Like I had floppy disks, so I'm that level of gamer. Where I had to like type in the DOS code. So yeah, that's where I originate. But I've been gaming my whole life. I think the first game that really like stuck out to me, not necessarily esports specifically, but my first game to completion was what is it called? Donkey Kong Country on the SNES.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was my first game to completion. I got grounded for a week because I stayed at my friend's house to finish it and skipped my dinner and bedtime to do so.
Oh, wow.
So that was my villain or story. And now I like League of Legends is my game of choice for esports.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, sweet. Fun to get to learn a little bit more about you guys. Let's jump right into some of these questions then, because yeah, we're looking at inclusive environments specifically in esports. So spaces for minorities, specific spaces like game changers, and yeah, just kind of talking about how esports really is for everyone and what that means kind of in the community today. So I think that first we should probably start off with like, what do you feel like is kind of the definition of an inclusive environment in esports? Like, what is really important to be included if you want to create a space that is open to specific people?
I'll toss it to Mel first.
To me first.
To me first.
Okay. To me, kind of what it means to me is kind of like what you were saying, is having that safe space for people that are persecuted for any reason, that kind of face any level of like oppression, whether it's in game or out of game, that kind of has prevented them from being able to reach levels of success that people that have a bit more of like a privileged upbringing have, you know. And that could be anything from, obviously, like it could be monetary, or it could be, in this case with Game Changers, it could be related to gender, like how people perceive your gender online and in real life, or if someone experiences like gender dysphoria on a daily basis, right? It could be that kind of thing. And to me, an inclusive environment is exactly kind of what we see in Valorant Game Changers, at least, where it's pretty much just a non-men league where it's open to everyone that has, like, you know, non-binary competitors along with women. It can be, it's pretty inclusive, I think. And for me, that's kind of like what I think is like the gold standard for kind of what it could look like across esports.
Mm-hmm.
Build off of that idea, I think safety is definitely number one. Like creating a space that feels safe to the people that you are trying to bring into that community. So thinking about what that looks like in education settings. So a little bit of my background is that I had first started an esports program in a school where I was teaching at the time. And I thought that showing up as a woman in gaming would be enough to draw in my female and female identifying gamers. And I was shocked when it wasn't. That the space of just simply being there and being a representative wasn't actually enough to create an environment that felt safe for them to come in and be themselves and show up in their truest sense. And when I would walk around the halls of the school, I would see girls at lunchtime on their phones playing games. They just weren't in the actual structured environment. And to me, that initial, like, I was curious. I was like, hey, clearly you're gaming. Why aren't you participating in the more competitive environment? And that's what really started some of those critical conversations about what actually makes a safe space and what makes the space feel that way. It doesn't matter what I'm trying to accomplish. It's how it's actually perceived by the people who it is meant for, and looking at getting real-time feedback from them so that we can make adjustments to create a space that is perceived as safe for them. So sometimes that means creating a space that is inclusive just for a specific group and building their confidence and safety and security there, and then introducing some allies that they're indicating these are the people that we feel safe introducing into this space now, and having it sort of as an invitation kind of approach. Sometimes it's creating a space and seeing who shows up and listening to the community feedback. But I think that going in with the intention of safety is fundamental, and then ensuring that you are getting live feedback and responding to that feedback to really create an environment that is responsive to the people that you're actually trying to support.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, is that, you know, it's not just to set up the space and just like have it on its own. It is, you have to be kind of constantly putting in the work to make sure that, like you said, you're getting feedback and you're making sure that as, you know, things change, that you're reflecting that in the space as well. I really like that. Yeah, it's really important. One of the other things that I think you're kind of mentioning about safe space, and you don't have to necessarily tell me like specific example, but when it comes to kind of like personal experiences online, are there moments that have really stuck with you that have been kind of like, wow, this is why we really need to have a space that is specific for certain people? I'm going to go ahead and share one of my experiences. I have been gaming for a really long time, and I have this like vivid memory of playing a competitive Overwatch game, just in the competitive ladder, not on a team, and calming and having somebody be really upset that I was a femme person in voice chat. And one of the sentences that they said to me was, "Why do you think that there's no women in the pro league?" And that, of course, brought on a lot of kind of thoughts about it. But this was long before the Calling All Heroes scene existed in Overwatch. And that moment for me was kind of like, if there was a pathway forward, I do think that there would be more women in the pro scene. So for you guys, has there been kind of a moment like that in your life or in your online kind of time where you've been like, this is why we need these spaces?
I could go first on this. I actually, right when you asked the question, I had a story come to mind immediately. maybe more on like the other side of the spectrum of like
Mm.
after being in the space, kind of seeing the positives it has brought, you know,
Oh,
being like, oh wow,
yeah.
it's clicking, you know. When I attended champs for Valorant in 2023 in LA, it came to North America, and just so many people were coming up to me and being like, I love Game Changers, I love you and your teams. I also love Valorant, and it seeing people and putting like a face to all the names and seeing how many people that were like me. They were like, you know, there were women and non-binary players that were coming up to me and just enjoyers and being like, wow, like you are like me and you also enjoy the game. And like, it's not, there really is no barrier in the sense of like, you know, men and women enjoy video games. Like that's, I know that sounds like so obvious to say, but growing up, you know, video games were an escape for me, and no one, I didn't know a single woman at my school that played video games. It was like a totally crazy thing. And I think nowadays in high school, you could say the word Valorant, people will know what you're talking about. You can say League of Legends, and you're likely to see other, you know, girls playing it. And I think that's really cool. And I think after existing in it, I'm like, wow, I want this to grow and expand even more, to normalize it even more.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very similar in that I've had the opportunity to see that dialogue shift quite a bit, especially over the past, I'd say even 5 years, but definitely over the last decade for sure. Like, I think something that was really interesting to me was coming to the realization, like, I'm by no means a pro gamer in any capacity. I've been a gamer my whole life, but growing up in the 90s, like, girls weren't gamers. That was something that nerdy boys did. And so I didn't
Right.
actually own my identity as a gamer until much, much, much later. And so with that, I also had to overcome my own sort of systemic barriers that I put up in my own head about like who I could and couldn't be and what kinds of spaces I could actually occupy myself. And so that was a really interesting experience. And I know being not in the pro scene side, but being more on the leadership side, I very distinctly remember a conversation fairly early on when I was starting to explore the nation based competition scene and having an onboarding meeting with some folks from the international space. And I remember this gentleman giving me all the information, and the like at the end of the call, he's like, and if you could pass all this information on to your chair, that'd be great. And the assumption was that I wasn't the one in charge. And
Ooh,
I remember how devastating that felt in that moment and how isolating it felt that the people that were in this space in leadership in the international scene didn't see me as someone who at the time didn't see me as someone who could be a leader in esports. And at least being able to now be in those rooms to challenge those perspectives in respectful ways rather than shooting people down, but engaging in conversation and dialogue, I think has been the approach that I've tried to take anyway. And so far, I've really seen that. That sort of perception shift over the past few years, where it is much more accepted and much more normal to see women in leadership roles now. And I'd love to see that grow. But I also know that I'm coming to this conversation around diversity from a pretty limited perspective, quite frankly, as a cis hetero white woman. Like, I'm not exactly the poster child of needing diversity support, but I do, with my limited experience in those kinds of situations, have tried to develop my empathy and my understanding and my sensitivity to it, so that even if it is someone who's had a much different experience than I have, that I can be receptive and responsive to it and try to be that ally to create the opportunities and spaces for them.
Yeah, I love that. It's so, yeah, so important to be that kind of ally, because yeah, I'm kind of coming from the same background where you, as you know, I'm a white cis woman that yeah, doesn't really have a whole lot of kind of difficult barriers that I've really overcome other than being a woman. So I think that yeah, being able to kind of speak up for the people that maybe are not being heard as much is really such an important part of creating any kind of an inclusive space, is making sure you're amplifying those voices. Um, yeah. This one uh can come from, I think, either side, either being kind of a player more like Mel, or even kind of more from the back end side of esports like you, Melissa, is how often are you guys coming across kind of like casual racism or sexism in the esports industry? And I want to add on to it, have you seen kind of a shift in the language that's being used? I think, Melissa, you kind of mentioned, there's been a change in certain aspects of esports. Like, do we have we been noticing that there's kind of like a shift in the language that's been used over the last little bit as well?
Well, I guess I'll start on this one. I think yes and no. And where I say yes is directly tied actually to post secondary esports and education esports. Since we've seen larger growth and support and development in those education spaces, whether it be K-12 programs or especially in the post-secondary programs. I can't speak to the US, but here in Canada, every time I've had the opportunity to interact with folks who have been part of those spaces and structured esports programs within academic environments, it's incredible. Like the level of professionalism, the level of respect, the level of it's like a night and day difference. And so because of that, I'm a huge proponent of these programs. I've had the opportunity just these past couple weeks to work with some of the folks from St. Clair on our FIFA E streams, because we've got our Rocket League team is competing for Canada in FIFA E, and getting to work with those folks, their willingness to jump in last minute to help with different aspects, and just the way that they conduct themselves, knowing that they have a much higher level of expectation going on stream when, there might be kids that are underage that are listening to it, and their responsiveness, and even just doing casting for nation-based competition when the world is so politically messy right now, and seeing the sensitivity they have to be able to not bring any of that into the competitive space, creating a nation-based competition that is still safe and exciting and encouraging and uplifting is absolutely incredible. And so I hope to see more of that adopted and built into the ecosystem. And I'm definitely noticing shifts, but it's like a dramatic difference as soon as you're working with anyone who's been in those structured academic spaces, in my experience.
Yeah, from like the day to day, I guess, like playing like rank ladders or scrimming kind of thing. Um, Difficult for me to stay engaged because I am on a team that is like pretty well known. So whenever we go into lobbies, it's not every game. Like I remember when I was playing CS like over a decade ago. Oh my god, Auntie just popped in. It was way worse. I would speak and because I was a lower rank, I would there's definitely a lot of casual sexism there for sure. As I've kind of gotten to higher ranks, I think there's that one study that's like as you get higher in ranks as a woman, people care less and they don't shit talk
Mm,
you.
mm.
And that's definitely something I've noticed just as I've gotten better and gone pro essentially. So I can't really speak for anyone that isn't like a pro. I have kind of that privilege of being in those like higher up lobbies, but yeah, I feel like it has gotten better in some ways and just gotten worse with some. I think it definitely the language people use kind of seems to flow with the tides of the politics happening outside of the game. I mean, frankly, the past like year and a half has definitely gotten worse, not gonna lie to you. But for me, it's pretty minute just in my experience, but that's very, very centered and isolated around my experience, my team's experience. It definitely still happens.
Yeah, I think if you have that kind of team where you're kind of in more of kind of an inclusive environment, you really do hope that there's not too much of the kind of negative stuff going around. But I do want to kind of touch on the idea of that this academic space really does kind of uplift this kind of level of professionalism. I've worked with kind of grassroots esports orgs for a really long time, and I worked with a college, a local university, for the very first time in this school year, and it was really like night and day, like you said, Melissa, seeing kind of when people have their kind of IRL experience tied to their online game, where these are students that are interacting with each other day to day in classrooms, outside of classrooms, versus my grassroots esports experience has been players that you're spread out all across North America. You never even really see each other's faces. So I think that having this kind of explosion of the collegiate league really kind of taking off, even here on the east coast of Canada, where there's not a whole lot going on esports wise, has been really, really impressive to see. I have been very impressed with kind of the growth, not just in kind of esports, but as like kind of as a person that these players have been going through. So yeah, it's been really impressive to see that. All right, we have some more targeted kind of questions towards what you specifically have some experience in. So, Melissa, we'll start with you first. So, obviously, you're founder of Esports Canada. So, when you were going through kind of the process of starting this up, was inclusivity kind of a central focus or a big part of the idea of creating this organization? And if it was, how was it incorporated, and what kind of challenges did you face with that?
Yeah, I think that that's something that's always been pretty foundational to the work that I do, no matter what space I come from. I'm one of those people who gets bored very easily. And so I've changed careers multiple times already. So I had started my career in musical theater and did that professionally for many years. And with that love of art and everything, it's always about connecting with people and understanding people's stories, and just looking at how we can really relate to one another, even if our stories are different, if we come from different places, that there is just so much common humanity if we just learn how to communicate differently with each other. And so then when I switched into education, I wanted to bring that aspect of who I am and the way that I approach life into the classroom. And I knew that one of the ways I wanted to get to know my students was through extracurriculars, because it's one thing to give your kids assignments, it's another thing to actually build a relationship with them, and that happens through extracurriculars. And there were all like the regular extracurriculars available, but as someone who's been a gamer my whole life, I wanted to see if I could start an esports program. That's honestly where Esports Canada started. I had no intention or expectation of it becoming what it has become. Originally, it was just a space where I wanted to create an opportunity for my students to develop themselves as individuals and connect and belong, find belonging through esports. And it was a tiny little one hallway class or school, like literally the whole school was one hallway. It was predominantly refugees and immigrants and Indigenous First Nations folks. And I was definitely the minority in that building. And this was something that like my students were passionate about. I saw the value in it, and I wanted to validate their passion and experiences, not just something that everybody sees as a waste of time, but actually something of purpose and meaning that can lead to a lot of really great things for them, in and outside a game. And so I was able to take that, and grow it into a national based school organization, is really what it was. And it wasn't until I was actually approached by industry to expand into nation based competition that we grew. That was in 22. And so it's always been very foundational to the way that I approach esports, but it's also something that I intentionally weave into everything as we continue to develop, because I want that to remain at the heart of what we are doing. And I think that it's a very Canadian value to look at how we can connect with people, how we can find validation and purpose and belonging for anyone, no matter what their background is. And I find that like in today's society, we're like a lot of folks, not even just like the older generations, all generations are really struggling to figure out how to navigate these digital spaces, because real experiences, real relationships, real things are happening in online spaces. But there is still sort of this unspoken disconnect between how we are expected to behave in in-person experiences and the expectations of online behavior. And it's definitely, I notice it quite dramatically with generations, where some generations really just don't get it. Other generations are getting it a little bit faster. I won't say which, but I think that that's part of the responsibility of the work that we're doing now, is to look at validating these experiences as real and connecting them to IRL experiences to just elevate, not to replace, to elevate what has already been established and developed in online spaces, and to make sure that all of those same values that we have as Canadians are then brought into those structures that we're implementing to provide those safe opportunities. And that's kind of the approach that I've taken to the work that I'm doing.
I just have to say that I would have loved to take your extracurricular in high school. I would have loved for that. That would have been so cool. Oh my God. Love that this is kind of like happening and forming in this generation. So cool.
Isn't it awesome?
Isn't it
Yeah,
awesome?
my high school did not have anything esports related. Even
Yeah.
the university I went to didn't have an esports program until after I graduated, and that wasn't that long ago. So yeah, it's really awesome to see these being incorporated, like kind of younger and younger. And like you said, Melissa, like it's so important to kind of get this kind of online kind of like literacy and like understanding of how to kind of behave in a space and how your online actions can impact real people that are not just names on a screen. So I think that's really really cool. All right, Mel. So I got to talk to you about game changers a little bit.
For
So
sure.
can you give us, for anybody that's maybe watching and isn't necessarily very familiar with what game changers is, can you give us a little rundown of what game changers is and kind of how it works?
Yeah, Game Changers is pretty much a tournament system ran in Valorant across the entire world, North America, Europe, and APAC. And pretty much the program exists to kind of like everything we're talking about here, be an inclusive environment for competitors who are femme presenting or non-binary. To say it in one sentence, that's pretty much all it is. It's just a nice safe space for people to compete that have been or they face like harassment online or any there's a whole list of reasons why this could be, a great place for someone to start or to continue competing in. And I've been a part of this program as a competitor with my team since it released, even since before it released when it was known as something called FTW Showdown. I've been here pretty much the whole time for Valorant. And growing up, when I was a teenager, I would watch the team CLG Red compete in CS, which were part of the kind of the equivalent of what Game Changers is, but the precursor for CS. Like I said, I was like 16 and I was watching these teams. So it definitely felt like a natural kind of place for me to be when I found myself in Valorant, and I really wanted to be the best in anything I did. And Game Changers also provided like a really cool platform for that. And it still is kind of going on to this day. So really kind of cool to see how it's grown and developed. And it kind of an important detail I left out. Each region has like one or two teams it sends to an international at the end of the year. I think the prize pool is like $500,000 and it's a whole LAN that has a whole production and everything. So I think that's really cool too, is kind of when my teams have gone, we are not treated any less than the VCT circuit that Riot Games puts on. And I mean it, like the production is exactly the same. They're using the same studios. They are bringing on top tier talent for casters and observers and analysts, like everything. They give you the same budget for food, girl, and it's good. Listen, I'm overeating every day when I'm out there. Like they give all the exact same resources. And it's such a cool experience to be like, wow, if I play in a Game Changers international tournament, this is what the pro life is like, and kind of giving you that insight and kind of giving you that drive, seeing what the VCT circuit is like. So sorry, I hope that was a good enough
No,
summary.
I love it. No, that's so perfect. Yeah, I love hearing a little bit more about game changers because I feel like it is kind of the pivotal kind, or like what a lot of these minority kind of divisions are kind of looking to kind of grow and expand. I kind of mentioned it earlier. Overwatch has the Calling All Heroes scene, which has kind of a similar idea as Game Changers, and I think that it's hit some hiccups and it's kind of growing a little bit. And I think having such a successful kind of organization that Game Changers is, it's a really good kind of roadmap for a lot of other orgs, teams, and different games as well. I'm sure that we will see many more kind of game changers style events come out as we go through some of these other games. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, because you had mentioned that you had played CS kind of previously. How much experience did you have kind of, because you've been on a game changers team for a really long time now, how does the time kind of compare to when you were playing on kind of like non game changers teams? Like, did you have a lot of time where you were playing on kind of like mixed rosters before you came into game changers, or was game changers kind of like the first like big roster that you played on?
I would say Game Changers like 2021, end of 2020 is definitely the first time I actually competed in like a 5v5 environment. I had done some little bit of competition in Fortnite, but that was like more duos. And whenever I played CS, I was very like casual pugs and stuff like that. Like I would play ESEA, which is like the platform that kind of matches you up against like better pugs and stuff like that. But I didn't really compete in a sense of like, all right, guys, we're gonna hop on for practice and we're gonna play in scrim for like 4 or 6 hours today, after work or everything like that. This was definitely my first time. And I owe a lot to Game Changers and FCW Showdown for kind of like kickstarting that and kind of getting me there. I think I would have competed, regardless, but the success that's come out of it is monumental, and it's been really cool to see.
Yes, awesome, cool. All right. I want to talk a little bit about how inclusivity is being incorporated into the scenes, because we did just mention kind of game changers. And I like, Mel, that you also brought up that, when you go to these LAN events, you are being treated exactly the same. You get the same money for food and everything like that. So I think what would be kind of like the biggest difficulties in incorporating a competitive esports scene to have kind of inclusivity considered, because we haven't seen it take off in necessarily the same speed that some of these other competitive orgs has been coming up. So what are some of the barriers that are kind of preventing from these esports scenes from having these separate orgs for kind of inclusivity purposes? We can start with you, Melissa.
Sure. I think it's an untapped market, quite frankly. Like, thinking about Canada specifically, one of the resources that I regularly reference is the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. They have some really great research. So if you haven't used it, especially since this is intercollegiate, make sure that if you're doing research and want to learn more about it, this is a really great tool and resource for Canadians specifically. In Canada, we have reported 51% of gamers in Canada are identify as women. And knowing that, we have a massive market opportunity that hasn't been tapped into effectively. And I don't think that this is something that is exclusive to esports, quite frankly, because we see it in sport as well, in physical sport. And so something that I've had the opportunity to be part of to a small extent in physical sport recently was with the PWHL. And so the Professional Women's Hockey League has a number of teams, obviously, across North America, but they've been doing these takeover tours, and they had a takeover tour here in Winnipeg, where I'm based. And going to that event and seeing, like, I knew in like conceptually, this is a really cool thing. I really like it. I support it, 100% behind it. But then physically being there, physically seeing an arena full of diverse folks, like, they weren't all just women or women identifying, like, it was a diverse audience, seeing women on the ice, which we expect to see, but then seeing the refs are all women, seeing the coaches are all women, seeing the owners and leadership are all women, was so overwhelmingly powerful. Like, I was overcome with emotion physically being in that space, going, like, I didn't realize my soul needed this until I actually physically experienced it. And I think that we're in a position where this is still really new in physical sport, and seeing that same sort of equity that Mel was talking about between the experience for game changers and the mixed rosters being parallel. We know that that's an ongoing issue with, like, the NCAA and with all of the physical sport. Like, so this is not unique to esports. This is just an equity issue in competition, period. And so I do think that we have a really great opportunity, because of the fact that we have statistics that justify the fact that, like, this is a massive, from like a marketing perspective, this is a massive audience that we can tap into. From a business perspective, this is a massive amount of economic impact that can be unlocked if you learn how to access it in an appropriate way. And it has that social benefit that creates a mutually beneficial ecosystem that is good for business, it's good for economy, and it's great for people. And I think that that's really what we want to look at building, and finding organizations that are willing to partner and invest and find ways of unlocking all that potential is really what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
Period. Honestly, this might be above my pay grade, so please excuse my ignorance, because I think Melissa put that great. And Melissa, you got the experience, exactly what you're talking about. I'm coming at it from like a player perspective, so bear with me for any ignorance on my end here. But yeah, I think for me, the way I kind of view it is kind of similar to like the meteoric rise of the WNBA. I'm someone that follows it a little bit, and I did not follow it until about 2 years ago when, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese went up against each other in the NCAA. So for me, I think it's just a matter of exposure. Like, one thing about inclusive environment is obviously, getting people into these situations, or sorry, these spaces where they can feel comfortable, where it is an escape for them and they don't feel XYZ negative feelings about anything. But I also think it is a matter of exposure, in the sense that I think we've all seen those moronic kind of dialogues online where it's like, why isn't there a woman competing in tier one yet? And it's like, to me, the way I view it is that it is purely a numbers game. When it comes to esports, like there is no biological advantage or whatever these people want to say online. It is purely a numbers game. And the whole point of all of this is to get more women playing in these competitive spaces. Like you were saying, Melissa, like there's a lot of girls where you see and they're gamers, but they aren't as inclined to enter the more competitive spaces. And I think the entire point for game changers and these initiatives is getting more women into these spaces where they're competing, you know, and it's just purely a numbers game. There isn't a ton of women, you know, competing, but we are seeing that number rise. And in my belief, the more that number rises, the more of a chance that we'll have that insane pop-off player that makes an insane play and plays at the highest level possible that you kind of see with, you know, Caitlin Clark, where I'm one of the people that started, you know, watching WNBA because I was seeing Caitlin Clark do insane things, you know, play the game at such a high level. And it introduced me to, oh my God, there's so many actually other women that are playing at a really high level too, you know? And to me, that's the way I see it, is just, it's just kind of a matter of time. You can't really rush the process, you know, as more and more, you know, femme players and non-binary players, you know, sign up and present themselves. And as the marketing reaches more and more of these people, we'll see more people, you know, playing, you know, these games and competing, and hopefully, you know, have a couple of Caitlin Clarks. And I mean, we already kind of do, you know, there's a lot of players that are really good across a bunch of esports that are femme and non-binary that are kind of getting more attention to their respective games. But that's just the way I see it as a player.
I think it's a good point.
I think that like that's exactly it. Visibility and just awareness, like all of that exposure is really, really critical. And Mel, you are that. Like the number of women who have been inspired because of you, like that is so significant. And we need more women like you in these spaces. And like that's exactly it. We need you.
We do.
I'm gonna start crying. And at no point was I even thinking of myself, and I was like, wait. They're validating me. Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's so true. I love what you said, Mel. Like it really is. It's a numbers game, and that was something that when that Calling All Heroes team was set up, there were actually 2 levels initially. There was one that was rising, that was for players that were under a certain rank, and then there was kind of the challengers, which was open to anybody that wanted to compete. That regardless if you were a low rank, if you wanted to play in the challengers, you could. And I thought that was such a great idea, because it's very hard to just open up an inclusive space and say, okay, you can go compete, but you haven't taken away some of the barriers that have existed kind of prior to that space. So a lot of these girls and you know, gender diverse people have not been playing competitively. So it's very, very hard to just open up kind of a top bracket and say, okay,
it's gonna
go
take
ahead.
some time. Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of the idea that, you know, you gotta put some involvement in kind of at the grassroots before you can get kind of that top level of players as well. And I think that having the representation of people at that top level so that people can actually see like that could be me is a really good way to kind of start that. We did actually get a question from someone in chat. So I want to go ahead and read this out for you guys. Yuji says, in your experience, what would you say is your biggest inspiration in terms of creating an inclusive environment? So maybe have you had somebody that you looked up to when you were either, you know, going on the path of pro or creating kind of the Canada Esports org?
Me?
Yeah, well, for both of you, I guess. But yeah, just like, did you have somebody that you kind of looked up to that was kind of like a role model? Like we were just mentioning, you know, having that representation is so important to being able to kind of see yourself in that position.
Well, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, absolutely not. There were no other women in leadership that I was aware of, certainly not doing the kind of thing that I was doing. And like, I didn't even see myself, quite frankly, as being that person. I saw myself as a teacher that was providing an opportunity that didn't exist previously for my students, and then going, oh, this is something that I could also offer. Like, it's so accessible, like thinking about the students that live in like remote reserve communities that don't get to even participate in physical sport in the same way because it's too expensive and too remote. They have to choose between, do I live with my home community and my culture and my people, or do I move to a larger metropolitan center to have these opportunities? And I loved that esports gave you the opportunity to do both. You didn't have to choose. You could participate and develop without giving up who you are and your culture and your community and your identity. And like, to me, that was like a no brainer. But I didn't see myself as being a leader in this space or creating something like I didn't go into this with any sort of major aspiration. So that certainly wasn't the case. But I think I was definitely, my inspiration came from the kids that I was working with and seeing the difference it was making in their lives. I had like, I regularly tell the story about one student I had who he really, really struggled. And like, this is an example where it wasn't actually like, it's not about women in gaming specifically. It's just about who needs community, who needs a place to belong. And this was a kid who had already been through central processing and he was 12. Like he had had a very rough life. His like educational goals were just stay in the school building, like no, like don't complete work, just be in the building, build some relationships until lunchtime every day. And that's it. That's your whole. But I found out that he played Smash. And so I had my Smash teams would play and practice after school on Tuesdays. And so then all of a sudden I found that like the deal was he had to stay for the whole day on Tuesday if he wanted to be part of the practice. So all of a sudden he started staying for the whole day. And he ended up then like being our gold medal champion in one of the tournaments that we played in. And it was a positive experience in a school setting and probably one of the first ones he had ever had. And to me, that's an opportunity to change a life. Like that's not even just a game, that's someone's life. And that inspired me. That continues to inspire me. Like that happened back in like, that was 2016. And to this day, that kid stays with me and that kid motivates me to continue to do this work, because there are a lot of times where it gets really hard to keep going because there is a lot of negativity. There's a lot of pressure. I get a lot of negative comments, a lot of negative DMs, a lot of people challenging the decisions that I'm making and the direction that I'm taking things. And I have to remember and remind myself of my why and why I started this work. And I do still believe in that. And so that's my motivation and my inspiration.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah.
Wow, that like genuinely is something out of like a Disney or Pixar film.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that is so heartwarming.
Student or anything like that, but he had a positive experience, right?
But that like touched his soul, like genuinely changed his life. That is so amazing. That's wow.
Yeah.
I feel like my story was like, all right.
Right? Like it's that every individual has value. They have purpose, they have meaning, and that needs to be validated. And so leveraging something as simple as esports to do that, like why not? We need to. Yeah.
I hope we can hear like more stories like that, you know, with time as it goes on. Cause that was so great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. I was gonna say my inspiration for community actually came from one of my teammates. Annie Dro, she was my teammate on Cloud9 White early on in my Valorant career. And I, at the time, obviously am not the Mel, I guess you guys kind of know me as today. I was just another grinder. I was another person kind of playing video games and trying to go pro. And she came into the team and she already had this like established stream and brand from Overwatch because she was really good at Overwatch. And I remember streaming and I would watch her streams and her community is amazing. It still is to this day. It's so inclusive, very, you know, friendly to like femme and non-binary folk and just hugely LGBTQIA. So funny, like amazing. And I remember watching being like, this is something I kind of want to have for, you know, my community whenever I stream. This is like my goals is to have something that feels as nice as this, really just so open and just so just funny and just fun. Just a lot of people that are similar to you, you know, and relatable. So definitely Annie Dro. Shout out Annie, one of my favorite teammates ever. I love her to death. I hope she's doing great.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so important is to like have those communities of people just kind of in lots of different spaces. It's not about just like having one streamer that is just like a big streamer with a really inclusive community. It's about having like lots of different streamers where you can pop in and you're treated kind of the exact same way as anybody else would be. And so it's really impressive to me, streamers and content creators that are able to kind of cultivate a community like that, because I feel like it can be kind of hard a little bit on the internet where where, you know, you're not really in control of who's watching and engaging with your content. So it's really kind of the way that these people are kind of presenting themselves on the stream that is going to draw in the folks that have that kind of similar mindset and want to be a part of a community that's like that. So it's really good to hear that, yeah, the community continues to be so wholesome for Annie. Okay, let's pivot a little bit here, and talk a little bit more about kind of esports globally. So Mel, you kind of mentioned Valorant Game Changers is kind of all across the world really now, not just NA, but in EU and APAC as well. So do you find that there is kind of a difference regionally when it comes to how kind of Game Changers is perceived? Do you feel like it's kind of maybe a little bit more stronger kind of for NA that they're kind of like watching and engaging with Game Changers, or is this kind of like globally it's getting a decent amount of traction no matter the region?
I think globally it's definitely getting a lot of traction, which is so crazy to say because it spans like you said, like North America, Brazil, Europe, and
Hmm.
APAC, and China as well, actually. Like it's so it's everywhere. And you see it like EMEA especially has a lot of org support. In
Mm.
terms of there's a lot of like actual organizations that are paying players to like kind of compete over there. So it's really interesting actually to see kind of how like the nuances of how it is in every region, but by honestly, by and large, it's positive and just it's really nice to see across.
Yeah.
It's literally I can't even exaggerate. It's literally pretty much like every part of every region that plays esports. Essentially, it's really cool.
It's yeah, it's so awesome to see it kind of like taking off across the globe, because I think that a lot of the maybe initiatives kind of like start in NA and EU, but to see that be like kind of just spreading all over like APAC as well is really awesome, because you know people want to watch esports everywhere. This is not just an NA and EU thing. So being able to kind of cultivate these communities kind of across the globe is so important for kind of growing inclusive esports as a whole. Melissa, with regards to, so obviously you're mostly based in Canada, and I don't imagine there's maybe too much regionality difference between Canada, but I never know. But do you have any experience, kind of like with esports kind of in the States? Is there any kind of a difference between the way that inclusivity in esports in Canada and in America is kind of perceived?
Well, it's interesting because like we do have really great relationships with the number of national federations across the
Mm.
globe, and so we are able to kind of gauge what approaches have been done. I find that there's a lot of kinship and parallels in the approach and structures that we've created between Canada and a lot of the Nordic countries. So thinking
Mm.
of Norway, Finland, Denmark, the Netherlands, all of those nations, they do tend to take a very similar approach to creating safe spaces and equity driven spaces. Um, the United States has just established a new org, the USA Esports, as a result of the Esports Nations Cup. So that they're still relatively new. So it's yet to be seen what their initiatives are going to look like, since their identity thus far has been fairly focused around just ENC. So
Mm.
we'll see what happens. I suspect it'll have a really strong, looking at the people that they have on their board of directors and the people advising the organization. Like Athena is Canadian. She's on their board of directors. She's dual citizen, and she's a fierce advocate for women in esports and diverse communities. And so I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of that. I'm excited to see how the game changers type events start to develop and create more permanence and visibility in nation-based competition. So for
Mm.
some of the smaller events that we see in nation-based competition from the Global Esports Federation and International Esports Federation, they tend to attract more the tier 2, tier 3 players, not tier 1. But they do usually have women's divisions, and so that's really encouraging to see. We haven't seen it yet from the ones that are really focused more on that tier 1 scene. So looking at
Mm.
ENC, we haven't seen it yet. Not to say that it isn't coming, but thus for this first iteration, we haven't seen that be prioritized yet. But they are trying to encourage folks to engage with their communities back home. So we'll see what happens in the coming years, but I definitely want to see that grow for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I really hope to see that as well. All right. think that I've kind of one more kind of question here, and then we'll start wrapping things up here. So we kind of mentioned that there's been a pretty significant shift, not just in the last kind of like decade, but in the last 5 years, where we're seeing inclusivity in esports really come more into focus here. So in looking forward now, in 10 years time, where do you guys think that the esports industry will be kind of in relation to inclusivity?
Well, that's a long time.
Or 5 years.
Yeah. Oh,
At least
man.
in the future, would you like to see it kind of go?
I mean, I personally, just hearing kind of what Melissa said earlier, I actually have always said, like, in 10 years from now, I'm hoping that this stuff is like in high schools. Cause
Mhm.
I genuinely, growing up, that would have been so amazing for me as someone that kind of used gaming as an escape. Being able to like put names to faces and find an in-person community is so important. And I think it really ties in with why so many people love going to LAN, like with competitive esports. Like there's a very big distinction when it comes to competition of this is online and this is LAN. And like when things are held online, it's like, oh, you could be an onliner, but you go to LAN, it's like you feel the crowd and you meet, your friends that you've been talking to about this event. You meet the people that are actually competing. And for me, like it would be so cool to see this being like really ubiquitous through education through high school. I'm not sure how it would work. I haven't even, do they still have computers in high school? Like they got Chromebooks still. I don't know what kind of technology they got, but it'd be really kind of cool to see this super normalized in high school as it is with trad sports. Like,
Mhm.
every school has a basketball team, or at least I grew up in Texas. Sorry, out of myself. No, I'm not Canadian. I live in Canada though. And football is huge there. Like the stadium, every high school is a big stadium for sure. So it'd be so cool
Mhm.
to see it at least like a little bit to that level. And just also, I would love to see it be so normalized for co-ed teams to exist in Valorant and esports, where it's like no one bats an eye if a woman is on a team. Like that's normal.
Mhm.
What do you mean? Like, of course, women can play at that level. Of course, there's that many women that can kind of compete. So for me, that would be really sick.
Mhm.
Okay, so seeing as you're from Texas, shout out to TechSF and Danielle at TechSF. You actually have
No
one of
way.
the
No way.
biggest programs in the entire
Really?
United States.
Really?
They have over 10,000 students that are competing on school teams across the state. Yes.
That is
That
so
is so
great to hear. Oh my
crazy.
God.
Yeah.
Dude, that must have happened right when I left. That's crazy.
Must have. Yeah. So Danielle is doing incredible work. TechSF is like
Love that.
iconic. I would say absolutely on track with what Mel is saying, where we are in a really great position that we do have school-based teams across the country. We do have provincial associations across the country. We're what I want to see, and we know that we're already taking the steps to get us there, is having those LAN experiences. So looking like just like you can take your high school basketball team to nationals, we want to have that within the next 5 years. We're going to have that for esports. And so that's something that we are prioritizing and working towards here in Canada in the school system program, and excited to see those national events that we already have online shift into those in-person experiences that are life-changing experiences for these students. And then also just the growth and development of our post-secondary scene. I really think that like investing in the next generation is what really gets us across the finish line. That's where we're really going to see the payoff. And when we look at like the data, we know that like over 90% of our kids are gaming every single day. This is something you can't ignore. This is something that is impacting all of Canadians. We have to take this seriously, and we have to provide them with those safe opportunities. And I think that pays massive dividends in terms of creating safe environments that then set a new standard for what's expected in play. And so I'm really excited to see that shift and grow. And then internationally, we'll see. I feel like it changes every like 2 weeks what's happening and what's expected. So we can't shift or change or even predict what's happening on the international scene. So it's awareness of what's happening globally, but investing in what's happening locally. And that's really where I think we need to spend our time.
I love that. I am very much going to be looking forward to what Esports Canada has planned for the future, because LAN events, incredible opportunity. And on the east coast of Canada, it's very limited. There are population centers a lot smaller, so there's one or two LAN events that happen, and you'll get maybe 2 or 3 teams that show up. So having the opportunity to go to a LAN event in one of those bigger population centers would be absolutely incredible, for folks all across the country here. So I'm definitely looking forward to all of these things as well, and continuing to see kind of games bring on a game changer type event, and maybe even having kind of those multi-level, kind of encouraging women and femme non-binary folks that are not really in the competitive scene yet to have kind of a doorway into the competitive scene, whether that is maybe through high school events or university, or even just kind of like grassroots community things as well. So definitely looking forward to the future for esports, specifically with inclusivity in mind. Before I kind of wrap things up here, I wanted to give you both the opportunity. Did you have any kind of final words or anything that you wanted to share before I do some ad reads?
Nothing crazy on my end. Just thank you so much for this opportunity. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I was in a call with Mel.
You were too kind. Thank you. Same for me. I'm happy to be here, y'all. Thank you all for having me. This has been a blast. It's been nice hearing, all of the things being said, all the stories. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you both so much for being here. So, and thank you to everybody in the chat as well for sending in a couple questions and engaging and listening to kind of what we had to say here. So also big thank you to BMO, who is our sponsor here. So to help you focus on what's important, BMO has checking and savings accounts, credit cards, and borrowing options that are specifically designed for students. If you open a BMO student account, you can get up to $950 in value, including $175 with BMO's current student offers. So you can visit bmo.com/students for details. You can also do !BMO in the chat. We also have BMO Next Level, which is a first of its kind program dedicated to helping gamers level up in game and IRL. This is run by Sean Frame, BMO's gaming relations specialist. Sean brings a commitment to helping viewers achieve their financial goals and has a passion for gaming as an active member of the gaming community. So for details on BMO Next Level, you can do !BMO NXTLVL in the chat. And also super exciting that we have a giveaway that is happening. So thanks to One of Zero, who has supplied us with 6 gaming mice that make you better at what you do. So if you type !raffle into the chat, into the Twitch chat, you'll be entered into for a chance to win one of 6 gaming mice supplied by One of Zeros. So code like a maniac, design like a guru, and game like an assassin. Take pride in your setup, look good while you achieve it. So discover your inspiration, defy definition, and be One of Zeros. More information on One of Zero, you can do !One of Zero in the chat. So once again, thank you all so much for coming out to support. Thank you to Melissa and Melanie for joining me here. And make sure that you stick around, because there's still lots more happening here with the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition. Because up next, we're going to have another panel. It is from Vision to Victory, founding of an esports organization. So that is going to be happening at 5 p.m. Eastern. So you can stick around for that next panel. There will be so much important information there if you want to found an esports organization. So once again, thank you everyone so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.